3 years. That's how long I was left to rot in London. I remember the exact moment I knew I was forgotten. I was on the ground, tasting blood, and my phone buzzed with a news alert from back home. A picture of Julian Blackwood, smiling, handing a mountain of roses to Clara Vance. The caption read, "Sterling City's power couple celebrates Valentine's Day." When I was burning up with a fever in a damp, moldy London flat, convinced I was going to die alone, he was throwing Clara the party of the year. I saw the pictures on Instagram. Just when I thought it was all over, one of Julian's assistants showed up at my door. "Ms. Prescott," he'd said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "You can come home now." On the flight back, I watched the clouds, wiping the condensation from the window. The same assistant approached. "Ms. Prescott, we're beginning our descent into Sterling City." He hesitated. "Just so you're prepared," he added, his voice low. "Forget Mr. Blackwood. He and Ms. Vance are getting engaged." My hand froze against the cold glass. After a long moment, I shook my head, a small, bitter smile on my face. That was a long time ago. I was just a stupid kid. I stood on the marble steps of my family's mansion, holding the single, battered suitcase that contained my entire life. From inside, I could hear my parents screaming at each other. A porcelain teacup shattered against the front door from within. After all this time, she has the nerve to show her face? Why couldn't she have just stayed gone? My father roared. "She was never as brilliant as Clara, not even as a child," my mother shrieked back. "Look at her. She looks like a ghost." Clara Vance is already being groomed to take over her family's entire enterprise. It wasn't until dusk that Maria, our housekeeper, finally slipped out. Wiping tears from her eyes, she pulled me inside. As we passed my parents' bedroom door, I stopped. "Mom? Dad?" I said softly. "I'm home." Something heavy slammed against the other side of the door. Maria flinched and hurried me up the stairs. "Oh, my dear girl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why are you still trying?" The very next day, I was informed I'd be working at a hotel. As I was leaving, my father stopped me. "Wait, when you get there, drop the princess attitude. You're not Ava Prescott anymore, you're just another employee. If I hear you've told anyone who you are, you'll regret it." I just nodded and walked out. It took a 20-minute walk just to get out of our gated community and to a bus stop. We were downtown when the bus screeched to a halt, throwing everyone forward. "We hit something," someone yelled. "What kind of car is that? Looks expensive." "Expensive? That's a Maybach. Our driver is screwed. He's going to lose everything." I looked up from the resume I'd been staring at. Our city bus had sideswiped a multi-million-dollar Maybach. Then I saw the license plate, JB1. My stomach dropped, and my fingers crumpled the edges of my resume. Julian Blackwood's car. The bus was out of commission. As I filed off with the other passengers, a chauffeur was already opening the rear door of the Maybach, and out they stepped, a perfect couple. Julian, in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my entire London existence, and Clara, her long hair catching the breeze. A murmur went through the crowd. "Who are they? He's gorgeous. Looks like a movie star. She's stunning, too." They look perfect together. Hiding at the back of the crowd, my fingers instinctively went to my earlobe. The piercing was gone now, just a faint scar. 3 years ago, Julian had mentioned offhandedly at a charity auction how much he admired a pair of pearl earrings. I've always been terrified of needles, but I went and got my ears pierced anyway. For his birthday, I wore a similar pair, hoping he'd notice. By some cruel twist of fate, Clara showed up wearing the exact same ones. And she was not happy about it. To appease her, Julian cornered me, his fingers hooking my earring and ripping it straight out of my ear. "Pathetic copycat," he sneered. The white pearl hit the marble floor, followed by drops of my blood. The memory snapped, and I clutched my folder, hurrying to the next bus stop. It wasn't a surprise. My phone had been blowing up all night with messages from Clara's friends. "Ava, you stupid bitch. Can't believe you actually came back. Just a warning, the future Mrs. Blackwood is Clara. Get over it. If you hurt her again, we'll destroy you. Slut. Even your own parents called you an ungrateful snake." I blocked them all. They were wasting their time. The concept of love felt like a foreign language I'd long since forgotten. As I stepped onto the next bus, I felt it. A pair of eyes, burning into my back from the direction of the crash. I didn't look back. I just got on and found a seat. The Azure Hotel. After the interview, the general manager walked over, smiling. "That was an impressive interview, Ms. Prescott. You've got a bright future here if you work hard." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Thank you, sir. I'm ready to start right away." He looked surprised. "Excellent. Head down to HR and they'll get you set up." The hotel was a whirlwind of activity, non-stop from the moment I started. But I didn't feel tired. I felt alive. My pay was commission-based. The busier we were, the more I made. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. Mr. Sterling, what kind of tea do you prefer? Julian, you're too kind. Anything you prepare yourself is an honor. I was walking past one of the private dining suites, taking inventory, when the voices from inside made my hand freeze. The door was slightly ajar. I could see Julian at the head of the table, commanding the room, stacks of documents in front of him. One of the junior staff members saw me and hurried over. Ms. Prescott, shouldn't you go in and serve them personally? It was standard practice. For a VIP client, the floor manager was expected to make an appearance, offer a complimentary bottle of wine or some specialty dessert. But this was Julian. If I walked in there, he'd either ignore me or humiliate me. That won't be necessary, I said, my voice tight. Just make sure their service is flawless. As I turned to leave, my eyes flickered toward the open door one last time and collided with his. He was looking right at me, his eyes narrowed, sharp and piercing. For a second, the world went silent. I was frozen, hit by a wave of pure, primal fear. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far away from him as possible. But I couldn't. This was my job. So I forced the muscles in my face to form the same polite, professional smile I used for angry customers, gave a slight nod, and walked away. 2 hours later, the cleaning crew was clearing the suite. Ms. Prescott, one of the guests, left a pen. I was about to tell them to send it to Lost and Found when the staffer added, "It's strange, Ms. Prescott. I think it has your initial on it." I took the pen from her. My breath caught in my throat. Couldn't be. The custom fountain pen I'd spent months crafting for his birthday years ago. I turned it over. There, engraved on the gold nib, was a tiny, elegant "Should I still take it to the front desk?" the staffer asked. My hand was shaking. "No," I managed to say. "I'll take care of it." Back in my office, I stared at the pen. I couldn't figure it out. Did he leave it on purpose? Or was it an accident? And why, after all these years, was he even using it? He'd always treated my gifts like they were cursed, something to be discarded immediately. I wrestled with it for a moment before locking the pen in my desk drawer. It should have been in a landfill years ago, along with everything else I ever gave him. Just then, a panicked staff member burst into my office. "Ms. Prescott, the guest from the suite, he's back. He's asking for you." I was confused. "Which guest?" "Mr. Blackwood. He says he's missing a pen." I frowned. "That pen isn't his." The employee's face went pale. I might have mentioned that you had it. He said he wants to see you. Now." They swallowed hard. "Ms. Prescott," he seems intense. My palms were sweating as I walked into the private lounge. Julian turned from the window overlooking the city. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice cold. His eyes bored into my empty hands. With me, he was always like this, a wall of ice, none of the warmth he reserved for Clara. But that was fine. 3 years of unanswered calls and complete abandonment had frozen my heart solid. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "If you're referring to the fountain pen, it doesn't belong to you." He gave me a look that could curdle milk. "Do you really want to be the reason your family's flagship hotel goes under, Ava?" My hands, clenched into fists at my sides, were trembling. Took a moment before I could speak. "You don't remember, do you, Julian? I made that pen for you, for your 18th birthday. I flew to Boston and apprenticed with a craftsman for a month. My hands bled for that pen. It's mine." I held his gaze. "You've mistaken it for a gift from Clara, haven't you?" I already knew how cold his heart could be. I wasn't foolish enough to think he'd kept it because it was from me. He'd simply forgotten, just as I thought. He stood there, silent, his jaw tight. I gave a slight, professional bow. "My apologies for the misunderstanding, Mr. Blackwood." He walked past me, pausing for a beat right beside me before striding out of the room without another word. When I got home that night, the atmosphere was different, almost calm. My mother's face had lost some of its usual hardness, and for once, my father wasn't scowling. She actually beckoned me to the sofa. "How was your first day? Are you settling in?" I nodded. "It's fine." She reached out and smoothed my hair, a gesture I hadn't felt in years. "The hotel's VP called. He said you were excellent." The sudden warmth was so foreign it felt like a dream. I sat there, stiff and unsure of what to do. After a few minutes of awkward silence, my mother spoke again, her tone cautious. "Ava, Julian's grandmother, has invited us to the estate for dinner tomorrow." I stared at her, completely bewildered. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "You've been back a while. I'm sure you've heard the news about the Blackwoods and the Vances." She took a breath. "They're getting engaged. The Blackwoods feel they owe us a courtesy. A dinner, before the official announcement." My fingers curled into a tight fist in my lap. My father's temper flared instantly. What's that look on your face? You still haven't accepted it? Clara Vance is educated, graceful, and kind. She's everything you're not. I clutched the work folder I was still holding. Mom, Dad, can I please not go? The Blackwood estate. When we arrived, the Vances were already there. The sound of laughter and easy conversation drifted from the grand living room. The butler cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. and Mrs. Prescott have arrived. The chatter stopped instantly. Every head turned. My eyes locked with Clara's, who was sitting right beside the Blackwood matriarch, looking every bit the perfect future granddaughter-in-law. The air was so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. Even my parents looked deeply uncomfortable. But the Blackwoods ran the city, and no one dared to cross them. My parents forced smiles and presented their hostess gift. The one person missing from this little gathering was the man of the hour himself. By 7 o'clock, there was still no sign of Julian. Julian's grandmother was visibly annoyed. We were already on our first course when he finally walked in. He strode into the dining room, his eyes sweeping over the table, this perfectly arranged tableau of his past and future. He frowned. Grandmother, what's all this? I felt his gaze land on me, and I immediately looked down, focusing intently on stirring my soup. Julian, don't just stand there, his grandmother commanded. Sit next to Clara. Clara and I were seated next to each other, but Julian walked around the table and took the seat on her other side, putting her squarely between us. My grip on my spoon tightened. I remembered when we were kids. I used to throw a fit if anyone else tried to sit next to him. It had to be me. Back then, he'd indulge me, treating me like a spoiled little sister. But as we got older, that indulgence curdled into annoyance. Eventually, it turned into punishment. If I annoyed him, there were consequences. I learned to be careful, to walk on eggshells around him. But I was so desperately in love with him that I always messed up. Throughout the entire dinner, my family was invisible. The Blackwood elders spoke exclusively to Clara and her parents. We were just there, spectators at our own humiliation. I think that's when my parents finally understood. This wasn't an apology dinner. It was a power play, a warning. Asterisk, their families are uniting. Know your place, and keep your problematic daughter in line. Asterisk, and still, my parents just sat there and took it, smiling politely. They had no choice. I glanced at Julian's grandmother, the matriarch. I remember her holding my hand years ago, telling me, "My dear Ava, you're the only girl I can imagine as my granddaughter. On your wedding day," she'd said, "I'll give you the entire Blackwood jewelry collection." Funny how things change. Back then, my family's company was still a rival to theirs. Back then, we were equals. Then the Vance empire exploded, and suddenly, I wasn't such a good investment anymore. Lost in the memory, my grip loosened, and my spoon clattered onto my plate. The sound echoed in the silent room. Every eye was on me. Julian's grandmother sniffed disdainfully. 3 years abroad, and she's still as clumsy as ever. Julian's mother gave me a tight, condescending smile. Ava, dear, you always did have a flair for the dramatic. My face must have been ghost white. I opened my mouth to apologize, to explain, but what was the point? As I looked down, I felt his eyes on me again. Julian, he was just watching me. He did something even more shocking. He pulled out a cigarette and placed it between his lips, right there at the dinner table. His mother shot him a death glare, and he slowly removed it, tossing it onto the tablecloth in front of him. Clara leaned closer to him, unfazed. Julian, Ethan just texted. He's in Norway seeing the northern lights. He wants to know if we'll join them. I looked down, studying the faint lines on my palm. Couldn't breathe. The room was closing in. My phone vibrated in my Persia perfect excuse. Excuse me, I mumbled, standing up. I need to take this. Once I was on the terrace, I answered, my voice filled with relief. Leo, his voice, warm and deep, washed over me. Ava, God, I miss you. A real smile finally touched my lips, but the words still felt foreign, catching in my throat. You too. He teased from across the ocean. Come on, Ava, you promised you'd say it back. Don't break our deal. Felt so hard to say. Leo, I'm getting mad, he joked. I closed my eyes and forced it out. I miss you too. Behind me, something clattered to the stone floor. I spun around, startled. Julian was standing there, his eyes narrowed into slits of fury. Quickly lowered my phone. How long had he been standing there? A cold sweat prickled my skin. Ava? What's wrong? Leo's voice came tinny from the phone. Something was very wrong. Julian slowly took out his cigarette case, lit one, and took a long drag, his eyes never leaving mine. His expression was terrifyingly familiar. It was the same look he'd had 3 years ago when he'd calmly asked my father, "Mr. Prescott, Ava hurt Clara. Should we send her to prison? Or just send her away for a few years to think about what she's done?" I ended the call. I had to get out of there. I'd made a mistake. This terrace, this was his private sanctuary. Just as I reached the doorway, his hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. "Who was that?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. His grip was so tight I thought my bones would snap. He'd never known how to be gentle with me. I fought back the pain, sweat beading on my forehead. "Julian, I'm sorry. I didn't realize this was your space. It was my mistake." "I understand what tonight was about," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Don't worry. I have no intention of getting in your way. Congratulations on your engagement. I wish you and Clara a lifetime of happiness." I tried to wrench my arm free, but his grip was like iron, fueled by a hatred so deep it felt ancient, as if crushing my bones was the only way to absolve me of some unforgivable sin. The more I struggled, the tighter he squeezed. I bit down on my lip, hard, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my tears. He stared at me for a long, dark moment, then yanked me toward him. Before I could react, he pressed the glowing end of his cigarette into the palm of my other hand. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. A scream tore from my throat. The pain was blinding. He leaned in close, his voice a guttural whisper from the depths of hell itself. "Ava," he hissed, each word a blow. "I'll ask you one more time. Who was that?" The pain shot up my arm and straight into my heart. I stared at him, stunned into silence. Just then, the terrace doors flew open, and everyone from the dinner party spilled out. Julian released me instantly. His mother was on me in a second. Her hand cracked across my face, the force of it sending me stumbling backward. Shameless girl. I was already reeling from the burn. The slap sent me crashing into the stone balustrade. I clung to it, my head spinning, the world a blur of shocked faces. Julian's mother's voice was shrill in my ear. "Is this how the Prescotts raised their daughters? To be shameless homewreckers? Julian is engaged to Clara." I pushed myself upright, my burned palm screaming in agony. I straightened my spine and met her furious gaze. "You've all misunderstood," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I know my place. The past is the past. I was just a foolish girl, and I certainly wasn't pestering anyone tonight." I held up my phone. "I guess I forgot to mention it. For the past 3 years, I've been seeing some Ava. That's enough." Julian's voice cut through the air like a whip. Before I could finish, he grabbed my arm and started dragging me away. I was too shocked to resist. "Julian!" He hauled me through the house and out the front door, his strides long and furious. I nearly twisted my ankle trying to keep up. Behind us, his mother and grandmother were shouting his name. He threw me into the back of his car, and before I could even scramble out the other side, he was in, pinning me against the seat. "Drive," he ordered the chauffeur. He took me to a sleek, modern penthouse I'd never seen before and locked the door. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Julian, what the hell are you doing?" He stood over me, my phone still clutched in his hand. His face was a thundercloud as he scrolled through my call history. I lunged for it, but he just held it higher, out of my reach, a cruel smirk on his face. "Give it back." I screamed until my voice was gone, but he never gave it back. Sometime after midnight, sheer exhaustion and terror finally won, and my eyes drifted shut. I woke from a restless sleep to a cool sensation on my palm. My eyes snapped open. I saw him, kneeling on the floor beside the couch, carefully dressing the burn on my hand. Our eyes met, and I flinched, snatching my hand back as if he'd burned me all over again. I saw the front door was unlocked and made a break for it. I only made it 2 steps before he caught me. "It's the middle of the night, Ava. I'll take you home in the morning." Without thinking, I bent down and sank my teeth into his hand. He hissed in pain, his grip loosening just enough for me to break free. I laughed, a cold, harsh sound, and turned to run. He grabbed the back of my shirt and slammed me against the wall. His body pressed against mine, trapping me. His face, so perfectly handsome, was inches from mine. All I could smell was him. "Is this how much you hate me now?" he whispered. I met his eyes and let out a hollow laugh. "Julian, I thought I was the one you hated. What's gotten into you?" I smirked. "You should let me go. What would Clara think?" Just then, a phone buzzed on the coffee table. My phone. I shoved at his chest, trying to get to it. He grabbed my chin, tilting my head back, and crushed his mouth to mine. The kiss was brutal, desperate. My protests were muffled against his lips. It was like being caught in a storm. He pinned my wrists against the wall, his kiss deepening, consuming me, as if he was trying to absorb me into his very soul. But through the haze of shock, I felt something strange. His lips were trembling. The hand tangled in my hair was shaking. He held me like that for what felt like an eternity. Just when my lungs were screaming for air, he pulled back. I didn't hesitate. My hand swung through the air, and the crack of it connecting with his cheek echoed in the silent room. His head snapped to the side, a red mark already blooming on his perfect skin. I scrambled for my phone and ran for the door, for the private elevator. But it was locked. I was trapped. I stood there, helpless. He was a silhouette in the doorway, a dark god in his own private kingdom. "Ava," he said, his voice flat and final. "Forget him." I couldn't leave. Calling the cops was pointless. He was Julian Blackwood. So I went out to the terrace and sat on a cold metal chair, watching the city lights and waiting for the sun to rise. "Ms. Prescott," one of his security guards said, approaching me cautiously, "there's a guest room prepared for you. It's cold out here. You should go inside." I didn't move. I just clutched my phone and stared into the darkness. The guard sighed and looked up at the penthouse. I followed his gaze. Julian was standing on the balcony above, a motionless statue in the dark. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel the storm gathering around him. I stayed out there all night. Dawn broke over the city, but the doors remained locked. The morning guard wouldn't meet my eyes. Fighting a wave of dizziness, I went back inside to find him. I found him in his home office on the phone. He just listened for a long time, his back to me. Finally, he spoke, his voice like flint. "You lied to get me to the estate last night. The only reason I stayed was out of respect for my grandmother. Don't ever pull a stunt like that again." He hung up and turned, finally seeing me. My voice was a raw whisper. "It's morning. Let me go home." He walked towards me, and I saw he looked as bad as I felt. His eyes were bruised with exhaustion. A strange, pained smile twisted his lips. "Ava, you remember how you used to follow me everywhere? You treated my house like it was your own." The memory hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked away. "We were kids, Julian. It didn't mean anything." He smelled of stale smoke, and his voice was just as raw as mine. He just kept staring. "3 years ago," he said, his voice cracking, "I was wrong. I chose Clara. I'm sorry." He took a step closer. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" I was stunned. I never, ever thought I'd hear those words from him. But it was too late. I shrugged, a gesture of pure indifference. "You love her. Of course you chose her. There's nothing to forgive. There's a saying, Julian. The head tries to be fair, but the heart plays favorites. Asterisk, just like you were so sure I hit her car on purpose. I was just driving. I never even saw her coming. Asterisk, I turned to leave. I really have to go. Ava, the one I love is..." I cut him off, spinning back around. "His name is Leo, and he once went to jail protecting me. He's the kindest person I've ever known." Behind me, I heard the metallic clatter of his lighter hitting the floor. When I finally got home, my parents just stared, speechless. I walked past them and locked myself in my room. I called in sick to work and spent the entire day just sitting there. That evening, my mother knocked on my door. She set a bowl of soup on my nightstand and sat on the edge of my bed. She gently took my hand, her eyes welling up as she saw the fresh bandage. Then, her fingers lightly brushed the side of my face where I'd been slapped. "Does it still hurt?" she whispered. I managed a small smile. "No, Mom, it doesn't hurt anymore." After that night, something shifted. Things at home, they got better. 3 months later, I was at JFK waiting. I saw him before he saw me. Leo strode through the arrivals gate, a huge grin on his face, and pulled me into a hug, ruffling my hair. "Still so skinny, Ava. Have you been eating?" I just smiled, and that's when I felt it again, that feeling of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder and my heart stopped. Julian, standing with his entourage not 50 feet away. I heard one of his assistants murmur something to him. I quickly turned back, grabbing Leo's arm to steer him away, but it was too late. Julian was walking right toward us. "Mr. West," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Pleasure to see you in Sterling City." The two men shook hands, their eyes locked in a silent battle. "Julian," Leo said, equally smooth, "what a coincidence. Just flying in." They both turned to look at me. I avoided Julian's gaze, looking at Leo with a questioning frown. Leo gave me a reassuring smile. "Ava, this is Julian Blackwood of Blackwood Holdings. We've been negotiating a partnership in Zurich." "Sorry, I didn't get a chance to tell you." I just stared. I could feel Julian's eyes on me, dissecting me. I felt like prey. He turned his polite, predatory smile back to Leo. "I'm sure you haven't had lunch. Allow me to host. A welcome to the city." My eyes shot to Leo, pleading with him. He met my gaze, a silent conversation passing between us. To my horror, he smiled at Julian. "That's very generous of you. We accept. I was frozen. Leo squeezed my hand. It's okay, he murmured. It's just lunch. Then he looked at Julian, his smile widening. You don't mind if my girlfriend joins us? Do you, Julian? Julian's mask of civility slipped for just a second. His eyes dropped to where Leo's hand was holding mine. After a beat, the mask was back in place. Of course not, he said. The more the merrier. The private dining room at the Azure was a minefield of unspoken tension. Julian had invited a few other local CEOs, ostensibly to welcome Leo, but it was clear the goal was to get him drunk. Seeing Leo in this corporate setting, he felt like a stranger. Back in London, we were just two lost souls. He was a couple of years older, the guy who'd stepped in and saved me from a couple of thugs in my neighborhood. He'd rented the basement flat next to mine. When I was so broke I had to scavenge for scrap metal, he'd follow me from a distance to make sure I was safe. When he got into fights, I'd spend my last few pounds on antiseptic and bandages. Then one evening, a black car screeched to a halt, and a group of men in suits bundled him inside. He just vanished. I didn't hear from him again until after I got back to Sterling City. He called me and dropped a bombshell. He wasn't an orphan. He was the long-lost illegitimate son of a European tycoon. Halfway through the meal, I slipped out and asked a waiter to prepare some coffee. They were all trying to get Leo drunk. As I turned to go back, I walked straight into a solid wall of muscle. I stumbled back. It was Julian. I tried to sidestep him and go back into the room, but he blocked my way, leaning against the doorframe. Coffee? He sneered. Worried he can't hold his liquor? I turned back, my hands clenched at my sides. Don't play dumb, Julian. You've been pushing drinks on him since we sat down. Is this how Sterling City shows its hospitality? I lifted my chin and glared at him. In a flash, he grabbed my arm and dragged me into the empty suite next door, kicking the door shut behind us. Julian, have you lost your mind? He backed me against the wall, his body pinning me in place. He stared down at me, his eyes wild. Ava, I'm not going to marry Clara. I don't love her. His voice dropped to a raw whisper. It's always been you. My brain short-circuited. The world went silent. What did he just say? Before I could process it, he leaned down and his mouth was on mine. I started beating against his back, my voice muffled against his lips. Julian, let me go. But my struggles only made him kiss me harder. He bit my lower lip, just hard enough to sting. Ava, he murmured against my mouth. Give up. It'll never work between you two. The second he released me, I stumbled back, my legs feeling like jelly. I saw the dusty footprints my shoes had left all over his expensive suit pants. I grabbed the back of a chair for support. Julian Blackwood, I seethed. I hope you rot in hell. I went to the restroom to fix my smeared lipstick before going back. When I sat down next to Leo, he gave me a warm, gentle smile, and a wave of guilt washed over me. I avoided his eyes, pouring him a cup of the coffee that had just arrived. Here, drink this. He smiled and took the cup. Thanks, Ava. Julian walked back in, looking completely composed. One of the other CEOs immediately started sucking up. Julian, they just brought coffee. Let me pour you a cup. Fine, he said, his eyes on me. He sat down, his gaze a blatant challenge. Just then, Leo reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Ava. I turned and gave him the brightest, most genuine smile I could muster. Across the table, I could practically feel the temperature drop. When the lunch from hell finally ended, I took Leo up to a suite to rest. An hour later, he was awake. I was sitting on the sofa, and when I looked over, he was watching me with a soft smile. How are you feeling? I asked. He shook his head. I'm fine. Hey, didn't you promise to show me the real Sterling City? Let's go. I was surprised. We can go tomorrow, you should rest. But there was an urgency in his eyes I couldn't ignore. Okay, I said. Let's go now. I took him to all my old haunts, the food stalls in the village, the boardwalk at Coney Island, the Met. He was enthusiastic about everything, like a kid seeing it all for the first time. When I dropped him back at his hotel that night, he was still smiling. I raised an eyebrow. Kicking me out already? He gently flicked my forehead. If I asked you to stay, he said softly, would you? I faltered. The truth was I wasn't ready for that. Not with him. The air grew awkward. But Leo, ever the gentleman, broke the tension. Scaredy cat, he teased, his smile returning. I'm just kidding. Your car is here. Go on. I waved as I got in. See you tomorrow. When my car pulled up to my apartment building, I saw it. Julian's Maybach, parked across the street. The pavement around it was littered with cigarette butts. He'd been waiting. He emerged from the shadows of the building's awning. I scowled. What are you doing here? He just stared at me, his face a cold mask. Are you in love with him? I ignored him and started dialing my driver. Ava. His voice was dangerously quiet. I spun on him, Can you please stop haunting me, Julian? You're like a ghost I can't get rid of. I'm a person, not one of your possessions. My driver finally answered. Miss Prescott? I was just there. Mr. Blackwood saw me and told me to go home. He said he would be taking you. My hand was shaking. I stared at Julian, my voice dripping with ice as I spoke into the phone. Is that right? And who signs your paycheck? Robert? Him or me? Get back here. Now. Or you can go work for the Blackwoods tomorrow. The look on Julian's face was murderous. For a second, I thought he was going to lunge at me. Instead, he turned, got into his car, and peeled out, leaving the smell of burning rubber in the air. I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, but I couldn't stop the trembling that ran through my entire body. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Leo. Ava, are you awake? His voice was strained. Listen, I'm so sorry. I lied. I'm at the airport. I'm on my way back to Zurich. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding. What? I have to go, Ava. Please, take care of yourself. My fingers were numb around the phone. Leo, what's going on? What happened? Did Julian threaten you? I thought you said your family was powerful enough to. He cut me off with a bitter laugh. Ava, that's the problem. They're too powerful. I can't escape them. He took a shaky breath. They've arranged a marriage for me. I have to go through with it. I could hear the anguish in his voice. I have no choice. They gave me 2 days of freedom before the wedding. I had to see you. My mind went blank. I'm so sorry, Ava, he whispered. Yesterday calling you my girlfriend, I had no right. I wish they'd never found me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I wish we could have had a real chance. Couldn't think, couldn't speak. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, mourning the loss of the only true friend I'd ever had. A flight attendant's voice came over the line. Sir, you need to switch your phone to airplane mode for takeoff. Leo, I said quickly, my voice tight, we'll always be friends. I wish you all the best. I went downstairs. Julian was sitting in our living room. I frowned. My parents came out of their study, beaming. Ava, go get ready. We're all going to the Blackwood estate. I shot a look at Julian. My mother pulled me aside. Ava, this is different from last time, she whispered urgently. Julian came himself. Something's changed. Just come with us. Her face broke into a wide smile. Now, hurry up and change into something nice. She bustled off to the kitchen, leaving me alone in the living room with him. I gave him a humorless smile. Weren't we humiliated enough the last time? He ignored my question, his eyes locked on mine. He closed the distance between us in a single step, his hand coming up to cup the back of my head. You've been crying. He held me in place before I could pull away. He leaned in, his voice a low murmur. Because Leo left you behind? What do you care? I hissed. Let go of me, Julian. He leaned closer, his lips brushing my ear. Ava, he whispered, I'm never letting you go again. The only way you're getting away from me is if you kill me. The Blackwood estate. It was nothing like I expected. One by one, the Blackwood elders apologized to me. Even the matriarch. Ava, my dear, she said, taking my hands. I was a foolish old woman. It will never happen again. Please, give this old woman a chance to make it up to you. I stared at them, completely stunned. I picked up my teacup, my mind racing. What was this? What were they playing at? Suddenly, Julian took my hand. If you'll all excuse us. He started pulling me towards the grand staircase. I realized where he was taking me and tried to pull my hand away. He leaned in and whispered, Do you want me to get down on one knee right here, in front of everyone, Ava? I froze. He led me into his study and closed the door. On his desk was a thick file. My face was staring up from the cover photo. I walked over cautiously and opened it. It was a detailed report. 3 years of my life in London. I clutched the papers, my chest tight with fury. You had me investigated? My voice was shaking. Good. Then you know everything. You know I was broke, that I was beaten, that I nearly died in that miserable little flat. So tell me, Julian, I said, my voice dripping with venom. What were you thinking when you read all this? I stared at him, and then he slowly, deliberately, sank to his knees in front of me. Ava, he choked out. I'm so sorry. I never knew, he said, his head bowed. I never knew how much I hurt you. I was completely frozen. Just then, we heard footsteps, and his mother appeared in the doorway. She gasped, and then the whole family was there, staring at the sight of Julian Blackwood on his knees before me. 6 proposals. I rejected every single one. I blocked his number, but he was relentless. A ghost I couldn't shake. They said Blackwood Holdings posted its first ever quarterly loss. Julian barely even went into the office anymore. My phone would buzz with a new, unknown number. Ava, I booked a table at Per Se. Please, let me take you to dinner. Block. Another text would come through. Ava, I miss you. Ava, please don't shut me out. He had an endless supply of burner phones. One day, I answered a call from an unknown number, thinking it was a client. It was him. I said the cruelest things I could think of, just to make him hang up. Ava, please, he begged. Don't hang up. Just let me hear your voice. How much have you had to drink, Julian? I spat into the phone. Why don't you have a few more and drive off a bridge? That would solve all my problems. And in that moment, I meant it. If he were just gone, everything would finally be quiet. Then, late one night, a call came from Ethan, Julian's best friend. I ignored it. He called again, the ringing sharp and frantic in the silent apartment. I finally picked up. Ava, thank God. Ethan's voice was panicked. You have to come to the West Side Highway. Julian, there was an accident. It's bad. Ava, he's not going to make it. He keeps asking for you. Please. It was chaos in the background, sirens wailing. But underneath it all, I could hear a faint, ragged voice. Ava Prescott, is she here yet? I need to see her. He hadn't used my last name in months. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I just sat there, numb. After a moment, I picked it up. Ethan was yelling my name. Ava, are you still there? I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I'm going to bed, Ethan. Don't call me again. My voice was cold and dead. It would be better for everyone if he just died. 30 minutes later, my taxi pulled up to the crash site. The flashing lights painted the scene in strobes of red and blue. Twisted metal, shattered glass, and a dark stain on the asphalt that hadn't been washed away yet. I stood there, bathed in the chaotic lights. Is he really dead? Then, from the shadows by a tree, a figure staggered to his feet. I gasped. It was Julian, his shirt soaked in blood. He stumbled towards me and collapsed into my arms, his full weight pressing me down. Ava, he whispered, his voice weak against my shoulder. You came. 7 hours. After 7 hours of surgery, the doctors said he was out of the woods. I was so exhausted, I fell asleep in the chair by his bed. I woke up to find him holding my hand. He was watching me, his eyes wide and pleading. He was too weak to resist as I pulled my hand free. But as I pulled away, something glinted on my finger. A diamond ring. He looked at me, his eyes begging. Please, he whispered. Don't take it off. He took a ragged breath. Ava, on that operating table I didn't want to live. But then I heard you. In my head, you said, Julian, wake up and we'll be together. That's the only reason I fought. I slowly lowered my hand. Ignoring the tubes and wires, he reached for me, his hands gently cupping my face. He pulled me down and softly kissed my lips. Ava, he breathed. I've never been happier. My hand came up, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Julian, I said softly, what if, one day, I wanted all of it? Your company, your empire. Would you give it to me? He pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me as tightly as he could manage. Ava, he whispered into my hair. I'd give you my life. Outside the hospital window, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, blanketing the city in white. I wondered when the snow would stop, maybe tomorrow, or maybe it never would.